Hey everybody, Larry Powell here, your host for Studio HFL, and this is HFL number 135. And this is with, man, we are really stepping outside of the brass world. This is with one of my favorite string players. This is violinist, one of the founding members, if not the founding member of the group Time for Three. This is with Zach Depew. Zach is a terrific musician, and I think you're really going to enjoy this interview. But of course, before we get to any of the interviews, I have to tell you about the show sponsors. Messina Covers is not just any other case company. David Messina and Erica Howard design and produce some beautiful cases that fit both form and function. And you can choose your case design, fabric, and trim color, add custom engraving, and more. And of course, you can find out more at messinacovers.net. Peter Pickett and his crack team of craftspeople are continually innovating and providing the trumpet community with spectacular options for stock and custom mouthpieces. He and Eric Murine can help you find just the right size to fit your needs, and you should definitely consider trying the acrylic cup and rim. And if you're in the market for a custom trumpet, then Peter and Eric can build a Blackburn trumpet just for you. Check them out at pickettblackburn.com. To stay current on what's going on with Studio HFL, you can follow me on social media on Facebook and Instagram. And you can watch the live and pre-recorded interviews on the YouTube channel. And while you're there, go ahead and subscribe. My first experience with a Hammond design mouthpiece has turned into a bit of obsession. There is something very comfortable about playing one of Carl's mouthpieces. The comfort, response, and sound are part of the HD experience. Try one of the stock mouthpieces or have Carl make you a custom one. Either way, everything is better in HD, and you can find out more at carlhammonddesign.com. If you're enjoying this podcast, I hope you are, I would love it if you would take just a couple of minutes and go to Apple Podcasts to leave a star rating and a review. Doing so will help improve the visibility of this podcast and draw more listeners. When I first tried an Eastman B-flat trumpet, I was blown away by both the playability and the sound. And the more I found out about the company and got to know the people, I knew that this was a company I wanted to have a relationship with. There is a drive for excellence in design and production of every instrument, not just the high-end products. And the proof of this is that the one and only Doc Severinsen helped to design the Eastman beginner trumpet model. I still play that B-flat and have added a spectacular cornet and flugelhorn to my arsenal. You can find out more at eastmanwins.com. I'd love it if you'd visit the Studio HFL website and sign up for the weekly newsletter. And while you're there, you can also visit the merch page and buy a Studio HFL shirt for yourself and as a gift for someone else. Of course, you can do that at studiohfl.com. My current situation with my C trumpet is a bit ridiculous. My Shire C, which Samantha Lane helped me trial and choose, is the most versatile C I've ever played. The same goes for the new Destino designed by Doc. This horn sizzles when I need it to sizzle and is as smooth as silk when I wear my never mind. Anyway, the line of Shire's trumpets includes the Q series, which are production models, and the custom series. Either way you go, you'll love the sound you get, and you'll also experience exceptional customer service. Find out more at seshires.com. Here's how you can access exclusive content like the interview excerpts. I'd like to invite you to become a part of the Studio HFL community by going to Patreon and choosing from one of the 4 tiers of support. You can help to financially support the show for as little as $36 a year. That's only $3 a month. Benefits include exclusive access to interview excerpts, a behind-the-scenes report, an invitation to be in the room with a guest during an interview, product discounts, and more. You can join the community of faithful supporters by visiting patreon.com/studiohfl. And now, on with the interview. Yeah.
You asked me about my fame and fortune crediting Time for Three.
Yeah, but let me back up. Since
Sure.
We can start fresh, this will all be spontaneous, just like it came from the ether for the first time ever, right?
Totally.
So I'll even do a little intro. Hey, Zach, nice to see you today, man.
Larry, thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, man, it's a treat to have you on here. You are the first string player I've had on this program.
What an honor. Really?
Well,
I mean,
it's part of community service, so it's not much of an honor, really. I'm just kidding. I'm just busting your chops.
Helping a colleague out. I don't know.
Right.
I mean, I'm
Right.
excited to have a platform to talk, man. There aren't many these days.
Yeah. Oh, no, I'm just kidding, of course. But yeah, we've crossed paths in the recording studio, in orchestra, and at the University of Indianapolis, where you are part of. Well, remind me, what's the name of that quartet down there?
The Indianapolis Quartet.
Yeah, right. The Indianapolis Quartet. Sorry, that's such a stretch for me to remember that kind of
It's
complicated. Name. Yeah, and it's nice having you around down there. I mean, I know the students appreciate having access to such high quality players. So, aside from those interactions that I've had, really where I first came to know you was, of course, through Time for Three.
Yeah.
And so the question is that kind of where you found your fame and fortune?
Well, definitely. I had a mutual passion for different styles of music with a couple of friends at Curtis Institute where we were in school. And back then, I mean, it's funny saying this now, but this is 20 years ago. That sort of experimentation was, I wouldn't say frowned upon, but nobody was really doing it. And we were still in a very different place as classical musicians. I think it was sort of the peak of we as instrumentalists need to perfect our craft as classical players and get a job in a great orchestra and then play as perfectly and accurately as possible. And I did that. I mean, I got the job in the Philadelphia Orchestra, but Time for Three grew very quickly. A big breakthrough for Time for Three, and I think for classical music, was when Beethoven's Ninth Symphony with the Philadelphia Orchestra at the Mann Center was to be performed. 5,000 people had shown up. There was a huge thunderstorm. The power was eliminated from the building by a lightning strike. And there was one emergency light and microphone that worked on the front of the stage. And the Philly Orchestra, this is back in 2003, had heard about Time for Three because we had gigged around Philly. And Renan was subbing in the bass section. So it was just two of us. Nick was at Marlboro Music Festival. And they said, hey, do you guys mind going out and playing 15 minutes? And then we'll have somebody else go out and play, and we'll just make a program happen over this emergency mic. And Renan and I are like, well, sure. And we went out for 15 minutes, and we did a solid 15 minutes of like just our stuff minus Nick. And we came off stage, and they were like, the audience was really digging it. Like there was a legitimate like concert vibe going on. And management was like, can you guys just keep going? Like everybody in the orchestra too was like, you guys just do this gig. This is your gig. So we went out and we did like another, like, I'd say 30 minutes. I mean, they asked us to keep playing and jamming until close to 9 o'clock, which was like, we don't have to return the ticket sales at that point. And we did just that. Renan, God bless him. He was right there as a soldier backing me up. I'm calling tunes, and I'm sitting on a chair and he's standing next to me because I had the microphone and catching his sound and the fiddle sound. We're playing into this one mic, and it really made a mark. And also just the audience left pretty thrilled with the whole experience. And it made a name for us big time. I mean, things took off from there. We got opportunities to play. Well, symphony orchestras were like, well, can you create, I think our first gig actually the next year was with the Wheeling, West Virginia Symphony. They called us. Andre Raphael Smith, the music director at the time, called us, and he said, I want you guys. And we said, yeah, we have charts. We'll make that happen. We had no charts. We had cool Americana stuff that we had written, arrangements, Orange Blossom Special. We wrote a tune called The Jig and Thunderstomp, and like it was just sort of a melting pot of styles. Anyhow, we took the gig and we wrote charts. We scrambled. We got some friends that were unemployed composers at Curtis to create charts, and we had a heck of a time. And things just really like we secured a meeting with the music director of the Philadelphia Orchestra, Christoph Eschenbach, who we sat down and we knew it was to talk to him about commissioning a piece for us in orchestra, like a formal piece. And we had some ideas of who we wanted. We sat down and he said, I know the perfect person for this. We want to commission Jennifer Higdon to write a piece for you. And we were like, that was tops on our list. So it was serendipitous. Philadelphia Orchestra was on board. Again, just putting ourselves now out in front of symphony orchestras. We were starting to tour a lot. I had to take a year off from the Philly Orchestra because of all the gigs we were getting, one of which was a New Year's Eve gig here in Indianapolis with the orchestra in 2006.
No kidding.
Yeah. And we rolled into town. And to be honest, we had been touring and hitting so many great cities. I didn't know anything about Indianapolis or Indiana, and I didn't know what to expect, quality-wise and orchestra-wise. And gosh, we got in front of that orchestra, and they sounded fantastic. And at break, one of the fiddle players said, we have a Concertmaster opening, and don't you play in the Philadelphia Orchestra? And I was like, yeah, but I wasn't looking for that job. So yeah, Time for Three was a huge platform. And I think that the Indianapolis Symphony hiring me, part of it was the relationship with a group like that and having their concertmaster out touring, taking the name, because the orchestra here had stopped touring. I think the last tour was 97. So really, they were relying on its music directors and individual players to carry the name and the torch outside of Indianapolis. So that was a huge opportunity, I think, for both sides. And we built a nice thing here over the 10 years, 11 years that I was concertmaster, and 8 years that Time for Three and I were together in residence with the orchestra. Annual giving was way, way up. By the time, when I first got to the symphony, and then by the time Time for Three was peaking and happy hour was cruising and doing, 10-week residency weeks of outreach performances in virtually every church that would have the ISO and us play. And we were everywhere. We played in the malls. We played in not Saks Fifth Avenue, but a department store, like a Macy's or something.
Right.
We were spreading the word of classical music and just music in general happening at the Hilbert Circle Theater. So we had things humming along. And this city, more than any city, relies on community engagement through its musicians. You're seeing that now with through COVID-19, you're seeing how many players are just playing out in their street corners in their neighborhoods now, and people are showing up. And the community, I think, makes note of that, and hopefully will continue supporting that ensemble. So
yeah, that's interesting perspective. Having come from Philadelphia, which is such a heavily urban community, right? I mean, Indianapolis is really, they call it the donut counties, where everybody just they go to work in downtown Indy, and then they all, spread back out to the surrounding areas, the suburbs. I had never really thought of it that way, but it's kind of nice to think of it that way, that their community aspect is really strong. So how fortuitous was that lightning strike in Philadelphia? And who planned that? Was that you or Renan that threw the breaker on that, right?
To be honest, Larry, like, I had just moved out of my apartment that day into a new apartment. My hands were pretty raw just from carrying stuff. I was in the back of the second violins for Beethoven 9. It was the end of the Man Center run. We were going to Saratoga for 3 weeks. And the last thing on my mind, to be honest, was like getting out in front of 5,000 people and playing. And it was Renan that was over near management, hearing what the plan was and hearing our band's name come up. And then he was just sort of there smiling, and he was just so ready and wanting to do it. He wanted the gig, man. And he came up to me, and he'll tell you that, literally, he's like, we're going to go play in 10 minutes. And I turned white as a ghost. I mean, I was just like, oh man, really? Are you serious? Oh. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to warm up. We're going to do this, hell or high water. All my colleagues in the Philly Orchestra are going to be sitting on stage, which is what they were doing. They just sat behind us.
Oh my gosh, they didn't even clear the stage for that.
No, they wanted to be out there and watch this circus act.
Yeah.
So it was, I'll never forget it. But it did, it proved on so many levels that, different styles of music are acceptable in a venue like that. And for an audience that was coming to hear, I mean, let's face it, Beethoven 9 is like classical music's biggest pop rock tune. I mean, I can't imagine a bigger piece for a classical concert, being more popular. So
Right.
Certainly that audience may not have been filled with consistent concert goers, which was probably serendipitous and very fortunate for us. But yeah, I mean, people were it was dark out there, but you could see people like, their hands up like this, standing up. I mean, it was just fiddle and bass, man. I mean, but we pulled it off, and it certainly opened up virtually so many doors for us.
Well, but that wasn't even really the beginning for you for that kind of music. And even before we go there, groups like Nickel Creek,
Mm-hmm.
the taking bluegrass, and of course they are kind of the epitome of newgrass, as they call it, right?
Yeah.
But it's that energy, that little bit of a twist to something, great performance, great musicians. It's just like you guys. You took bluegrass feel and sound and turned it into something really cool, right? So,
Well,
I mean, even if you didn't have your Bill Monroe fans in the audience, you've got people who appreciate good music, played well.
I think so. And we had an ear for a lot of stuff. Like Nick had a very, and still has a great ear for Stefan Grappelli and his style of jazz. And Nick, without really being a theory scientist in any way, shape, or form, and he literally just relies on his just raw talent, but he just picks up so naturally sound. And credit that to his education. He grew up in the Waldorf school programs, which instead of, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but instead of having a textbook given to you, the teacher teaches you the information. You create your textbook based on the information. You draw the picture, like in science class, you draw the pictures of the biology class and the different things you're discovering, and you write about it. So, and then at the end of the year, you have a textbook on that subject that you created, and it's yours. So he was always such a creative guy in that way, and disciplined, Suzuki trained, and we all were disciplined as players. Obviously we were Curtis, so we had all proven at least some level of ability to
Right.
manage around these instruments. But yeah, elements of sound in our ear. Renan was such a force because he did spend the time as a youngster. He fell in love with music through jazz, and he brought a foundation of holding down the fort, so to speak, harmonically for us, and always basically validating us in the improv world when needed. Like, Nick and I would kind of be like deers in the headlights if we were, I'll never forget we played with Branford Marsalis for a fundraiser in Philly, and we're walking him through the Orange Blossom special and telling him where he's going to solo, and I'm like, I said something to the effect of, yeah, just take, it's E major, and it's just that, and just take a free open solo. And Branford said, I don't do free, give me direction. Like and Renan jumped in and boom, boom, boom. And he became like one of our closest allies, to be honest, after that.
Cool.
Yeah, that group was a wonderful vehicle. For many years, I got the job in the Indy Symphony mainly because of that trio and my resume from orchestral experience. I had enough that they didn't feel uncomfortable hiring somebody. And I always felt that it was a really good relationship. I left the trio to work with the orchestra a couple more years. And then, the orchestra took and as you've noticed, as you're hearing in the news, I mean, not just because of COVID, but the orchestra is in a very, very big transitional period.
Yeah, not a good one right now.
It's not. They reset their goals of annual giving much lower than where we had brought it with the team, with Gary Ginsling and Holly Johnson and Time for Three and Christoph Urbanski. And, James Johnson came in and, they reset it. I don't know if it's because the community didn't feel like they had the funds to continue the level of giving that they were raising every year. And it is a pay-as-you-go orchestra. So there wasn't much work, money being poured into the endowment, which when we built this team, the idea was raise money and put some of that into the endowment. But we were paying the bills, so to speak. Not me, but the institution
I get,
was paying the bills.
but you look at short-sightedness there, and then something like this comes along. It's like, and it's not just the ISO management, and not to get into all this stuff, but you see a lot of chickens are coming home to roost right now because of, and so many different arts organizations, not just orchestras, but it's lack of planning, lack of real foresight on that. But
it is. And then there are a few orchestras that seemingly have a plan and have things in their coffers. Surprisingly, the Philadelphia Orchestra, the orchestra that filed bankruptcy in 2012, is the orchestra that's like been able to pay their players through this entire thing and keep virtual concerts now going. Unbelievable. Yeah. Having been there, knowing the financial struggles that existed, and when I left that orchestra, and just seeing that like now they're doing stuff during such a horrible time for all of us.
Yeah. Well, and kudos to not just the management, but creativity and suggestion of musicians of these groups to say, look, here's what we can do. And I think if management would include, I think they sometimes look at musicians as just the hired help. Like, we have nothing to contribute beyond the musical aspect. But it's like, you've got entrepreneurs, small business owners, big business owners, really smart people in your orchestra. It might be nice to tap them for ideas on how to get through something like this.
Orchestras are filled with hustlers. People that before they had this nice job had to hustle. And we've all had to do it at different points in our career. Freelancing, create stuff, carve things out for yourself. It's interesting because it's like, as you do that, your colleagues, the more you put focus on yourself, the more backlash you get. So it's like there's a fine line of self-promotion and pushing oneself without alienating yourself from your colleagues. So, yeah. And of course, being in an orchestra, you're all equals. So,
right. Let's back up to Curtis. And, you said you were there studying classical music and learning how to play perfectly, and which, that used to be my goal. And now I've adopted this thing, is just to go out and play with excellence. And if you're not that you're going to be sloppy, but you're all about creating music. I appreciated that you said that, but I think that's kind of where you're headed with that. Is you went there for one thing, but you came away with something completely different.
Well, I Curtis is a place to hone your skills and to develop your career. And they, depending on what avenue you want to go, it is an incredibly rich school to attend, and you have a lot of support. When you're at your freshman orientation, they explain to you that each one of you are individually important to this institution, and that's why we brought you here, because you have individual talents that we want to nurture. And that was always, so you were always placed in this place of like, when Harry gets before he goes to Hogwarts and he's discovering you're a wizard, Harry, it's that kind of treatment that we're like wizard musicians, and we're treated in that way by donors. And then there's a high expectation inside that school. So when you sit down in orchestra, we're all there to make music and play and commit to this almost religious experience of devoting ourselves to every marking the composer has and giving our 110% energy. Mm-hmm. So that was really the crux and the learning experience at Curtis. 50% of learning there is just osmosis of being around all those great players. and the energy and how we all just feed off of each other when you're in an ensemble. The videos that I've seen in today's COVID world of orchestras getting back at it, there is like a renewed energy and movement to the playing that's going on, and maybe less focus of those stupid, intricate details that really only matter to the individual and under the ear, but out there, communicating is becoming much more important than those, you know, again, just, I always found, and myself included, falling into that rabbit hole of getting too focused on little things and little details rather than the overarching effect of the performance. You can work on those things in the practice room and the kinks and whatnot, but when it's time to go, it's time to go.
So as a concertmaster, you're kind of expected to do that though, right? I mean, you've got to be at the absolute top of your game every rehearsal, every performance, right?
Yes. I mean, some concertmasters, as time moves on, maybe they don't necessarily expect that level from themselves, or they sort of settle into a comfortable, mature way. But yeah, I mean, the great ones that I always witnessed seem to have an energy that the orchestra could gather around, an energy and a level of capability, you know, accuracy, intelligent approach, also doing what the conductor's doing, and then able to disseminate that. So yeah, I mean, I've sat in the back and I sat in the front. It's a different alertness. It's a whole different alertness that those jobs require. But yeah, I always viewed the concertmaster gig as one that, you know, look, when things go awry, everybody looks to that chair. So
yeah,
but those you're right. In an orchestra, those three spots are the hot seats, man. They're in charge of, you know,
well, yeah,
those areas. So
yeah.
or responsible for.
Sure. So even before you get to Curtis, I mean, you've got a multitude of styles under your fingers, literally, right? I mean, Time for Three was not the first time you had explored anything other than orchestral music, right?
Right. Yeah. My dad had us gigging 50 to 60 times a year. We were freelance musicians growing up. We were a family of troubadour players, and we
The
had
Depew
everything.
brothers, right?
It's called that now, but at the time it was the Depew family musicians.
Oh,
And
okay.
the slogan was music for every occasion. And so we played weddings, funerals, receptions, dinner parties, entertainment for corporate events. You name it, we did it. We opened for Marie Osmond. We opened for the Letterman. Like, we were doing anything and everything. We were gigging. And my dad just wanted a platform for us to play, have an opportunity to perform the music we were studying, and also perform the music that he thought people wanted to hear. And some of that were the fiddle tunes that we were learning for fiddle contests in the summertime. So Bluegrass was the first avenue of like bringing in different styles. So like our program at first as a family was a lot of Bluegrass tunes, and then one brother would play a movement of Bach, and then it sort of went from the straw hats and the red vests to a little more Bach and more arrangements of Gorneweisen. And you know, as the brothers got better and learning their instruments, we were able to up the ante, so to speak, and push the envelope. And you saw that from the second oldest brother, Alex, especially. He was bringing home albums, Bela Fleck and the Flecktones. He was bringing in stuff that Dad didn't know about, and certainly it wasn't classical, so it was maybe not, it was frowned upon. But the innovation and the creativeness was undeniable. And Alex ran with that stuff, and he introduced all of us to it. So yeah. And each brother had a different focus growing up. Alex, in that improv world, my brother Jason was absolutely focused on concerto and solo work. He was playing Tchaikovsky concerto with the Columbus, every orchestra in Ohio, virtually, other than the Cleveland Orchestra, had, and Cincinnati Symphony. Like, the big orchestras didn't have them, but every other orchestra, Springfield, Ohio, Columbus Symphony, Youngstown, Akron, the Cleveland Philharmonic. He played Tchaikovsky Concerto, Paganini Concerto. And, you know, I'm there just sort of taking all of this in as an audience member, but also at home practicing. So observing these young men become like proficient at this instrument, and as I'm also learning it. So
yeah. Are you the youngest of the brothers?
yeah. So I had lessons, $5 an hour. My dad paid them. And so they did, you know, they abused me for that money. Except for Jason, but Alex and Wallace were old enough that they were like $5, a couple hours in the week, and I've got my weekend money. So
right.
And yeah.
So you mentioned who had gone through Suzuki. That wasn't your brothers. That was Nick you were talking about, right?
Nick's grandfather brought them. He's virtually the single person responsible for bringing the method from Japan to America.
Seriously?
Yeah. Back in the late 50s, early 60s, like a 60 Minutes piece. Well, 60 Minutes didn't exist, but there was a piece on the news that showed 750 little Japanese children playing Bach double in an airplane hangar. And his grandfather was like, I need to figure out what that is. And so he went there, met Suzuki, worked with him, studied the method, brought it back, and then literally traveled the country, pioneering it in every major city, town, university, coaching and training Suzuki and spreading the word. And there were a couple other pioneers that jumped on board right away with him. But that was, and in Bowling Green, Ohio, there was a Suzuki trained teacher named Grace Baker that I started with, my oldest brother started with. And her Suzuki program didn't adhere to the Suzuki program proper. And to be honest, there weren't enough students in Bowling Green interested in playing violin at that time. It wasn't the most popular thing to be doing, especially when you get to junior high, is playing a string instrument in Bowling Green, Ohio. So,
well, is it cow tipping? Was that the pastime out there? Is that?
Man, you know, not to downgrade cow tipping. I've never done it.
I'm just kidding. Yeah.
But they get it here in Indiana too. So I mean.
Yeah, right. So, you know, my wife went through the Suzuki program. Okay. And now our youngest, he's 10. He's on the Boccherini Minuet, last one in book 2. And I take him to lessons, and I do group lessons with him. And man, I'm learning tons about this. And I was supposed to get this past June, but got postponed till next June. But there's Suzuki trumpet now. So I'm going to become a Suzuki certified trumpet teacher next year, as long as, you know, nothing gets canceled again. But man, what a I think a beautiful thing, just training the ear, training, you know, the sound before sight, which I really believe is key. It's such a huge thing.
It's enormous. I think it's enormous. It again, going back to, you know, the idea of educating children. I went to Montessori early on when I was 3. I was the only brother to do this, but I think that that was a huge impact of allowing me the space to be creative and to trust in it, and to really, you know, one of the things that I found at Montessori was that they would give you some toys, and instead of telling you what to do with it, they would observe you and see what your strengths and weaknesses were and interests. So that kind of development early, I think, really helped just to free me to trust myself and to be myself.
You know, I've seen that. Our boys, up until this year, we just transferred them into the public schools, but they've been at Montessori their entire time.
Right on.
And I'm as you're telling me this, I'm like, man, I've been there. I've watched it. And you know, one of my biggest things is, like, once they're doing virtual right now, but when they get into a classroom, are they going to know how to sit in a desk in a row? You know, because that's not the Montessori way, right? It's the freedom, the creativity. And the encouragement, you know, that individual attention, I think is huge there too. Just like Suzuki, I think.
Yes. And it is difficult to go from that to be sitting behind a desk and just sort of having somebody open your brain and start stuffing information in there and then close it, you know. So
yeah. But I saw, I guess, what had become the Depew Brothers Band.
Mhm.
This was like 2012 Arts Midwest Showcase. And I had a group that was showcasing. We're up in Grand Rapids, and the group going right before us was where there were your brothers. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I mean, they were killing it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you've seen those things, right? The showcases. Have you been part of those where, presenters come and go, they're shopping to see who they're going to invite for the
Well,
season?
Time for 3 did all of those all
Oh,
over the country, and then my brothers started doing them, but I was so busy with orchestra and
yeah.
Time for 3 that I wasn't part of their run. But yeah, they showed up and did some of those for
Yeah.
sure.
But Time for Three did that. So you
Yeah,
did APAP and Arts Midwest and all those,
15-minute show.
right?
Strut
Yeah.
your
And it
stuff.
cost a fortune, right?
2,500 bucks or something just to have a spark. Our manager subsidized because he had several acts and he bought he had a booth.
Mm,
So, but yeah, that whole thing's not cheap. On the other side, if you book a string of gigs, I mean,
right.
our APAP, and we did live on stage.
Oh
My
yeah.
year I
Out of
took off from the
Nashville, right?
orchestra. Yeah, community concert series. We did 60 of those. And then we
Wow.
added to that another 60 or 70. We had 70 other gigs with orchestra and performing arts centers. So we had 130 gigs over 9 months, period of September 2006 through June of 2007 when I was hired in Indy.
Yeah.
It was
Well,
crazy.
here's an interesting question. There's a difference between a fiddle and a violin, right? It's the cut of the
Mhm.
bridge, and isn't it? I mean, fiddle players usually, and the number of teeth you have, right? Isn't that? I am going to definitely edit that out. That is never going to make it.
The difference between a fiddle and a violin is that a violin has strings and a fiddle has strings. You can edit that one out
No,
too,
man,
man.
that's staying in. In fact, that's going to be the teaser that's going to open up the interview.
You know, to be honest, I mean, I've never found a huge difference in the setup other than generally speaking, the acoustic nature of the classical player they're much more reliant on the acoustic element of their instrument. You know, although bluegrass players and what they do now is the level of what they do is gone up too. I mean, the cross pollination that's been going on in the last 20 years of these styles. I mean, Chris Thiele, the mandolin player, is
All
just sort
right.
of become the sort of bridge and bringer of all together.
The goat, is it Goat Rodeo? What's the name of that? He and Yo-Yo Ma. There's a.
Go rodeo sessions.
That's it. That's it. Yeah, Goat Rodeo
Yeah.
Sessions. Right.
Yo-Yo Edgar, Stuart Duncan, and Chris Thiele. Yeah. And
Yeah.
actually, I just did a gig 2 weeks ago. The keyboard player had somebody lift one of their tunes and write out parts. All the parts for one of their tunes called Attaboy. And we did it. I mean, we didn't have mandolin, so it's 2 fiddles. We put the cello part, Yo-Yo's part, on flugelhorn for Conrad to play.
Oh, nice.
And keyboard just sort of covered everybody's part. Our drummer just added a little thing. It's a total acoustic piece. And the bass player Renan was on the gig too. He played Edgar's part that was written out. So don't necessarily want to tell them that we did that, but yeah. And those sessions are awesome.
Yeah.
What those
Yeah.
guys do.
Yeah. I will say I've not been a fan. Well, I stopped listening, and I don't even think they call it Prairie Home Companion anymore. But once he took over for, I already forgot his name.
Uh, um,
Yeah, good. I don't
Gunther
feel so bad.
Schuler. Gunther Schuler.
No. The guy that ran Prairie Home Companion.
Garrison Keeler.
Garrison Keeler. Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Boy,
Yeah.
it's amazing. Somebody that was so in our musical lives is
Yeah.
gone for 3 or 4 years, and you can hardly
Right.
It's It's a what have you done for me lately business.
Yeah. I was just editing another interview earlier today, and Trent Austin, he's a trumpet player, and he said, well, you know the life of a musician, right? It's like, who is Zach Depew? Right? There's one. Then I want to hire Zach Depew, and then I want a younger Zach, and then who is Zach? Right? It's like,
Yeah.
I never thought about it that way, but it's like, you know, out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
Steve Martin just popped into my head, right? You know, Steep Canyon Rangers and what he's been. I mean, the guy is ridiculously talented in so many ways, but that he can come out and do this stuff on banjo and whatnot. I don't know. I think maybe you guys have a future working together.
He's had a nice collaboration with the Philadelphia Orchestra, and my
Oh,
brother
no kidding.
Jason. They have a video. If you go dig into the Philly Orchestra's Facebook and go in their videos, one of the videos they've released during COVID was a Steve Martin tune called "Office Supplies," and it's just a 3.5, 4 minute bluegrass tune. But my brother was part of writing out the chart for it, getting it to the band. The tuba player of the orchestra orchestrated it. And so there's like this jam session. My brother's playing mandolin on it in addition to fiddle. They put a really cool video. Check it out. It's a lot of
Yeah.
fun, and it's
Yeah.
really cool to see the great Philadelphia Orchestra like having a piece like that as one of their videos during COVID. It was a neat thing. It's a really cool video.
Well, and thinking too, the creativity, Jeff Kerno in that group, you know, graphic design. He did my logo for me. You know, I'm
Did he?
very, right back there. You know, he designed that for me, and you know, it's well, David Bilger. You know, I gotten to know him a little bit. It's like there's a lot of talented, obviously, you know, more than just the brass section, but
oh gosh, but that brass section, Nitzan, Carol Jansch, you know, the thing about the Philly Orchestra that always amazed me is that yes, the principals are great, but the number 2 player is as good, if not better, in many regards to certain repertoire, and they discuss it with you. Like Matt Vaughn is an unbelievable trombone player. Blair Bollinger, I mean,
right.
Kurnow, you know, Bilger, stacked.
Right. And see, these are names, you know, the others, Carol Jantz or Yantz, you know, that's a name that's on my list because making waves, right? And for a long time.
Yes.
I want to talk just a little bit. Of course, you've done so much orchestral work and chamber music, but now with the Indianapolis Quartet, what is the real focus of that group? I know you're there to also coach students, but what's the mission of that group?
You know, when we set out to do this quartet, it was to bring a highest level of great classical repertoire to central Indiana, and then carry the Indianapolis name out nationally and internationally. It really was to be a vehicle to carry the city's name out. It still is. And, you know, we did a Carnegie debut at Weill Recital Hall. You know, we've been doing performances and whatnot and getting our name out and getting reviewed and those things. Mainly because there's really no other classical entity leaving the city to tour and carry the Indianapolis banner, so to speak. And again, I think that Raymond Lepard did such a beautiful job creating those opportunities for the orchestra. And so, you know, we just figured, let's do this on a smaller level and try to do that. So that's been the inception. We're in, like, I think year 4 of this project. You know, the passing of Crystal DeHaan certainly hurts. Her foundation is the quartet's biggest sole supporter. So we'll see how the foundation decides to roll forward. But I think that we have something important. It's really nice and meaningful to have influence there at UIndy for the students when they need us to tap into us. I know Michael teaches quite a bit adjunct, as does Austin Huntington. And of course, second violin Ioana Genova is on faculty. So, and anytime she needs me, I'm always happy to come and support lend support to whatever she needs there. So
Mm-hmm.
that's really been the sort of mission statement. That's a long mission statement, but to really bring great classical music to Central Indiana and carry it nationally and internationally with the Indianapolis banner.
You have ideas about repertoire for future things? Is it standard rep? Are you looking to commission anything, or are you going to expand some time for 3 pieces into that into that group?
we could do that for sure. Although the quartet has commissioned 1 quartet by Robert Patterson out in New York, and that's his 3rd quartet, and we're recording all 3 of his quartets. We're delving into bringing, especially this coming fall recital. It's only a 2-hour program, but we're definitely taking responsibility and bringing people of minority music, composers of a minority background to this program. Montgomery is the composer we're bringing to this specific program, and hopefully more as we discover. Certainly, there's so much great repertoire by the great composers, and we all want to play that because it's what we studied in school and it's what's endured the test of time, so to speak. So that said, discovering and lending support as much as possible in this new social environment that we are living in, and trying to lend ourselves to being a at least responsible performance ensemble in terms of bringing light to a lot of music that otherwise remains in the coffers. And my dad's a composer. He's 88 years old. His stuff, he's retired from BGSU. I come home for Christmas and, he'll say, I had 1 performance of my music this year. And I know the stacks of music that he's created. And it's just kind of unbelievable, probably the thousands of composers that have created music that sits on shelves. So I get it. And, hopefully we'll continue to find some cool stuff to bring along for the ride.
Yeah.
But we've been in this Beethoven exploration, all of his quartets, and also just the transition of his music. If you followed those quartets, the 18s just in such a classical form, the middle quartets experimental and moving towards this romantic. You get to the late quartets and it's just total experimentation, and it's the harmonies in there. I mean, it's like there's some wacky stuff, but it's unbelievable. But he really, so it is a musical world that I wanted to jump into when I left Time for 3. I wanted to get through the Beethovens and do that. So we've been chipping on those.
Sergei Nekryakov, trumpet player, can play all the trumpet rep. So, of course, next thing he does is delves into the string rep, which is great. Zagunarweisen, and even on his 4-valve flugelhorn, he does Kol Nidre, the Brook, and I mean, it's just. Yeah. But what it's really done is taken me out of the trumpet world and made me realize just how much great music there is out there. Non-trumpet, it's like, man, the strings. Well, you have such a history, a much richer history of string rep than we do. And it's just nice to get to know those pieces. So, I'm enjoying getting to know, Variations on a Rococo theme has been one of my favorite things to listen to. Oh, it's cello, right? But it's still one of my favorite things to listen to right now. But so, man, Zach, this has been kind of fun. I wish I'd pushed record. I'm sorry I forgot to do that, but I'm just kidding.
All right, let's do it all over again.
Yeah, right. Well, we had to do that right at the beginning, at least for a couple of minutes. But I appreciate your time this afternoon. This is I'm glad we could make this work out. And I always like getting to know people a little bit better than just saying, "Hey," in passing. But
it's my pleasure, man. Have you? I don't know if you want to record this, but have you lost weight? You look like you're shedding it.
Yeah. Let's see, since about 85, down 85.
What's the secret, man?
medically supervised diet. How about that?
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and
Good for
exercise.
you. Good for
So
you, man.
I'm, let's see, how much further? About the same. I want to lose about the same yet.
Wow.
So I want to get back down to, I wanted to get to my original weight, but I don't think 7 pounds, 9 ounces is quite, is quite possible.
Oh,
So,
man.
but yeah, thanks.
Good
I
for you.
appreciate you saying that. Yeah, thank you.
Congrats,
It's
man.
interesting. You don't see people for a long time, right? And like this, I've seen each other since maybe an airborne session.
Yeah.
I'm actually going down this week. I have a gig this week. I'm so excited. Going down to Owensboro. I haven't seen my Owensboro Symphony people since it was a January concert.
Wow.
Right. So, and I know they're going to say, holy cow, what's happened. But
I'm
yeah,
sure it's, shocking for some.
yeah, yeah. Well, for me too, it's like,
Yeah, man.
I don't have clothes that fit anymore, it's a nice problem to have, so
Yeah.
I'm working on it, but yeah, feeling healthy, enjoying being able to ride bikes with my family and walk and everything. So trying to stick around. I got a granddaughter too, I got to stay healthy for everybody. So
You have people to live for. That's
absolutely. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
great.
So, well, yeah, thank you. I appreciate the time, and I look forward to the next time. If it's at UIndy or the studio or wherever, I look forward to the next time we get to play together, whatever that is.
Likewise, man.
Yeah.
Likewise.
So, stay healthy, and I'll let you know when all this is ready to go.
Cool. Yeah. Take
Oh,
care, and thanks for this.
you
Thanks
bet.
for having me
And
on.
it's been a pleasure. Thank you. Hey, thanks for joining me today for my interview. Hope you enjoyed it. And if you want to hear more, you can visit patreon.com/studioHFL. By becoming a supporter, you can have access to content that is exclusively available to my Patreon patrons, which would include excerpts from interviews. I'd also like to remind you to visit Apple Podcast and leave a star rating and a review, and don't forget to follow me on social media. Thanks again for being here and listening, and I hope you come back for another interview next time around.